Hello folks, and welcome to our game again this Thursday with myself, Shane Stapleton, as always joined by Michael Verney. This time he's in the front seat of the good car because you had all sorts of drama going on today.
Yeah, to bring the dog to the vet there. Thankfully, she's okay. I got back to the house 5 minutes before the show started, and a big glass clock fell off the wall. So there's glass everywhere in the house with a baby and a dog flying around. So not ideal, but sure, listen, we'll plow on. You adapt and you overcome. You meet challenges in games. You meet them head on. You find a solution, and you just stay going.
And so if the show falls flat today, who are we blaming? The dog? The baby? You?
Misha, yeah. definitely Misha. Just so you know there, the graphic for the club fundraiser came up there just on the screen. Like, perfect time of the year over the next couple of months to get a live club fundraiser going. We've had some brilliant ones down in O'Loughlin Gales. We had the one in Windmill Quarter as well there before the All-Ireland football final, and we had the one down in Rome Moor earlier on this year. Just it's a great thing to fill the winter's evenings as well. And obviously, you know, most clubs will be finished around October, November time, and you're trying to get funds for the year ahead. So I really encourage anybody to get in touch with us there. We put on a good old night, and because it's not recorded or anything like that, there's usually fairly good shenanigans in the room as well.
There's a nice bit of jawing going on in it. Look, we have another packed show, of course. One of the things we're going to do is a bit of an end-of-season award in terms of who was the best player for each Liam McCarthy team. So let us know. There's 11 different teams that operated at that level this year. Who was the best player and why? So we'll come to that in a while, but get your comments in there now. We're also going to talk about, previewing some of the big fixtures this weekend. Like, there's two teams that could be in for massive relegations. Like, they're an hour away from huge relegations. We'll come to it later. One is Glen Rovers, another is Athenry, who, they were All-Ireland champions not that long ago. They could be going to the third tier, to intermediate in Galway. We'll look at the Derry GA situation and some of the other county championships, including can Burr get it done in Offaly. But anyway, we'll come to that in a while. First of all, Fergal Healy, he's been moved from minor manager to become the Galway under-20 boss. And the talk is Joe Canning, James Scahill, Eamon Cleary, Pádraig Duddy, they'll all be involved with him as well. So that's some of the big news in Galway. And then Shane Dowling, who's had some underage involvement with Limerick already, that he's the new minor hurling manager for Limerick. So that's great news for him.
Yeah, like, only 30 years old, Shane is. He's obviously forced to retire before the COVID championship with a knee injury. Got involved with St. Joseph's Dora Bearfield, I think in 21, I think I'd be right in saying. And he's involved with the Limerick under-16 setup, I think, this year as well. Obviously on the Sunday game as a pundit with RTE as well. So that's it's a big job. Obviously, 30 years old. He'd definitely be able to relate to the players fairly well. Anyway, he's not going to be old school or anything like that. And just with Joe as well. Yeah, Joe's involved with Fergal Healy. I think they'd be very disappointed. I know it's not all about winning or anything like that, but all the talk was how good that Galway minor team was this year. And some really tasty players. Clare kind of blew them away in the All-Ireland final, but yeah, they'll be hoping to make amends over the coming years. Even though I know Fergal Healy's been fairly strong on, his big thing was the amount of games that they're getting to play, particularly in comparison to other years as well. So kind of suppose with regards to Dowling, involved with the 16s, now manager of the 17s. The boys in Galway involved with the minors, now 20s. So there's a fair bit of continuity in both counties as well.
Yeah, and just to reflect back on that minor All-Ireland this year, it was Clare 222, Galway 411. It was a bit of a no-show performance as the second half went on. And, with underage teams, that can often be, the case that the game gets away from them a little bit, and whatever you try and do on the sideline, it may not have an impact. POL 74, Liam Cronin is a big help to Dowling. Dara Joyce is staying down with AFL outfit Brisbane Lions. He's signed a new one-year contract there. With all the players that Derek Ling has probably seen from afar that are down in Australia, I think Richie Lahey's down there, Connor Brown. I'm not entirely sure who else, but maybe James Maher as well. But I'm not sure if they're in Australia or elsewhere. But geez, the thought of Dara Joyce coming back, I'm sure he'd have loved that. But then again, the more years you spend away from the hurley, the harder it is to come back and have that touch just right.
It's not like Gaelic, Shane. Like hurling is. I always find hurling is grand. Like if you're out for a couple of years or something like that, one of these guys, when the ball is around here, it's fine. But it's the speed around the feet. I don't know if you've ever noticed when you're out of hurling, like under a high ball, a couple of games and you're back into it. But when that ball is breaking around your feet, and hurling's real weird, it never breaks straight in front of you. It breaks at an angle and you have to move and contort your body certain ways. And when you're out of it, I've noticed with guys, that's the biggest problem, is that when that ball is around their feet, how difficult it is to get it into your hand really quickly. Whereas that's why you'd be so impressed with someone like Desi Hutchinson. When the ball is around his feet, he's lightning. And he was obviously out of the game a couple of years as well. But like with regards to Dara Joyce, it's obviously a guy maybe whose career was a bit up in the air down under. Now he's after getting a contract again. Like there's a thing as well, Shane, with the AFLW. The minimum contract, I think, over the coming years is going to be 50 grand for all the women going down. So like there's, you know, the way there's someone who coming back and playing a bit now, or even going out after their county season is over. I think that's all gone in a couple of years. Like the AFLW, like if they're going to be giving them that sort of contracts, and I believe they're going to be bolstered even more in time, like it's going to be ladies football or AFLW. It's going to be a choice. It's not going to be, oh, they let me stay till after Dublin played the All-Ireland, maybe like the Dublin midfielder from Coola that went out just after a couple of days after.
Dunn.
Yeah, like I don't think you're going to have that luxury anymore. So the LGFA are going to have a big problem on their hands, I think, there, because it's a bit of a player drain, as in the best, the cream of the crop are going out there. They're able to mix the two of them at the moment, but I don't see that happening in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, like even from a Tipperary point of view, seeing Orla O'Dwyer out there, and you know how professionally they're preparing, you're like, geez, be no harm to throw her in wing forward there with the Camogie team, or into the mix with the footballers as well. But yeah, you like if there's big money at play, and we're seeing the likes of, isn't it, Oisin Mullen and Mark O'Connor coming back to play with their clubs at the moment, and you're wondering, in terms of the club and all that stuff back in Ireland, it's brilliant to have them back, and I'm sure they love it too. But yeah, if you pick up that injury and you end up kind of losing out on a lot of money, that's a tough pill to swallow. Brian Lohan staying on for a 5th year with Clare. Considering how last year went, you know, coming up short again in the Munster final, don't mind that too much, because they were right there with Limerick at the very end, and a contested, you know, free that they should have got, might have levelled the game, and who knows what would have happened from there on in. But to again come up short in an All-Ireland semi-final, that has to be bitterly disappointed. I still don't think that there's too many people in Clare who would want him gone and just feel like, right, have another shot at it. But I'll tell you one thing, this Clare team, in terms of the likes of John Conlon and Shane O'Donnell and Tony Kelly, like the time is right now. If the All-Ireland is going to happen, it's like this year or next year max for those players.
Yeah, I don't think there was any doubt whatsoever from anyone in Clare that whether Brian Lohan was going to stay on or not. Like it's mad. I think he can do what he wants in Clare in a good type of a way. He's obviously unified the county, because I haven't heard a bad. You chat to a lot of people from Clare, and I haven't heard a bad word spoken about Lohan from anyone in Clare. Despite, you'd have to say, there have been a few faux pas down through the years. You know, Keane Nolan picking up Aaron Gillan, I was kind of still scratching my head over that. Maybe bringing Paddy Fitzpatrick in from the cold for that All-Ireland semi-final when John Conlon missed out, even playing the sweeper in the All-Ireland semi-final this year. But what I thought was interesting, Shane, was the fact that his backroom team wasn't named or anything like that. So we'd kind of maybe mooted the possibility of a new name being involved, and I'd be surprised if there's not a new name involved. Like I was very surprised with, you know, some of the decisions, or the decisions that were made, and some of the decisions that weren't made. Like Aaron Shannon are coming on so late in the All-Ireland semi-final. I just think a few things passed them by a small bit. I don't know whether they need an eye in the sky a bit more, or someone that is going to make decisions a bit more, will see things a bit differently. But I'd be fairly surprised if you don't see a big enough name in the backroom team. Somebody new, maybe someone will step out, or the remaining names will stay there. But I'd be surprised if there's not somebody new just to freshen it up a small bit.
Do you wonder if, like, some managers who don't seem to spot things on the line should consider sitting up in the stands, because it's less emotional up there? I know that Eamon Kelly, who was over Laois, Offaly and Kerry, I know that he's kind of done it in the past, whereby he sits up in the stand, and that was after conversations with Anthony Foley, the former Munster legend who was managing the Munster rugby team, because he worked, I think, with Anthony Foley's wife, and he ended up having discussions, and that's how it came about. Now, like, I've done it as well, sitting up in the stands or standing up on top of the dugout, because you get a better view.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about it. Right? And I couldn't care less how it looks like. But to me, maybe that's something for Brian Lowe and maybe other managers as well, that you have to ask, is there a reason that I'm not spotting these things? Am I being stubborn, or is it I'm actually just not seeing it? And maybe sitting up the stand could be part of the answer, because you can remove yourself a little bit more from the emotion of it.
Some people, I would think, don't want to be removed from the emotion of it. Lohan's a very emotive type of fella, and I think he maybe feels he can be more of a motivator on the line. Where you have maybe a manager who, like, it's kind of amazing that Jim Gavin didn't go up high, to be honest with you, because he had no, like, it seemed like he had no input on the line with the Dubs, and he was totally removed. He's probably the most emotionless manager I've ever seen across any sport, and it's kind of surprising maybe that he didn't go up to the stand. And speaking of emotions, like, I know Davy's a very emotional manager. He's gone up to the stands at various stages. Of course, there's a famous time he was in the box as well, where well, that had nothing to do with it being a choice or anything, but he was forced up there. But
I was there for that.
Yeah. Well, it was mad, because, like, wasn't it? It was basically like a car with the tinted windows, where you nobody could really see in, but you could see perfectly out. It was a bizarre type of scenario that added to the whole. That was in 18, wasn't it? Yeah. But that was mad. But yeah, I'm surprised more lads don't do it. Particularly in the first half of games, when you see maybe patterns emerging, you see very little down on the sideline. But some lads would love. If I was a manager, I like being down on the sideline, because I like letting in roars here and there, and I like keeping certain lads on their toes. But then I think you need somebody on the counterbalance of that, someone who's watching up in the stands, totally emotionless, and can see things that you can't see, and will make calls and provide you with that information.
Yeah, Adrian McGrath says, who would you have put on Glen Verney? Nolan did fine until the yellow card. The problem was not taking him off him in time. I think we all agree with that. That, you know, there were options. Like I think Shane Amori was the one who went on.
Rory Hayes as well. Like, obviously,
yeah. Well, look,
Adam Hogan as well.
Yeah, and the one thing is, if something's not working, you can't stay looking at it. So you could see Nolan's confidence ebb as well, and that's nothing on Nolan. These things happen. And, like, we've all been cleaned off in a match, and sometimes you need to be moved, and that's fine. Like, you don't slate a player over.
No, just on that, Shane, as well. Like, I think, yeah, like, Keane Nolan was the most inexperienced of the three Clare players in the full back line. And you might have a plan in your head to think, yeah, he might be able to take him. But when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I think you give him a chance. Like, he could have matched up maybe better with Flanagan, or he could have matched up better with Casey. But the fact that we could see it and it was getting worse and there was no change made, like, that was very surprising. It's one thing putting him on him and it not working, but for you to persist with it. And, like, he's one of the best forwards in the game, probably hurler of the year this year. There's no shame in making a switch. Hayes is more experienced, All-Star nominee last year. Hogan only in probably first year, but, like, a brilliant man marker as well. So I just think the options were there. If you wanted to put Nolan on him from the start, fair enough. But I think you have to put the hands up and say, mea culpa, wrong. Maybe I made the wrong man here, or I put the wrong man on Galan. Make a switch and move on.
Hurling 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure where this is coming from, but Shane, was the commitment for Coola in 17 and 18 when you won back-to-back, similar to intercounty from talking to teammates? Well, I'd say even from 15 to about 18 or late 18, we'll say, I would, having spoken to some of the lads, like, for example, I remember chatting to Paul Shute, and he was like, you know, like, even the setup is arguably, I think he was suggesting, even more professional than the county at that stage. Now, obviously, one thing for sure, like, the training level is going to be as intense as an intercounty training player, because you've got the 30 best lads in the club versus the 30 best lads in the county. The matches aren't going to be as attritional. It's 70 minutes versus 60. But in terms of the amount of commitment, I'd say there was huge amount of commitment. And again, I can't imagine it's the same as county level. And I'd say whatever we were doing then, it's shot up an awful lot even since. But at the time, it definitely, from chatting to those boys, the commitment was very, very high.
It's funny you say that. Like, the Burr team back in the days, 02, 03, 95, 98, the All-Ireland wins, like, that was, the commitment level was different with inter-county back then, but they were, like, those teams were definitely doing as nearly as much as most county teams back then, and really good club teams run themselves almost, and I'd say Coola was like that. It runs itself almost, and you've a lot of big kind of personalities in the dressing room, lads that drive it on. standards are very, very high. So yeah, there wouldn't have been much of a difference with the Burr team and with the Offaly team back in the days as regards commitment and different various bits. And I'm sure it was the same at Coola, albeit the volumes of training maybe were a bit different.
Yeah, and I suppose if we're to go into the first big club game this weekend, the relegation final in Cork, I think, is nearly more enticing than the 3 quarterfinals. Now, why are there 3 quarterfinals? Because Middleton are already in the semi-final by dint of their performances and their results in the group. So there's only 3 quarterfinals on. Relegation final is Glen Rovers against Kanturk. Now, on the face of it, you'd be like, okay, Kanturk, they've good players, the likes of the Walshes, Lorcan McLaughlin, so on and so forth. But this is Glen Rovers, who've been in 3 county finals in a row from 19 to 21. They've won the county title 27 times. They've been there, like, I think they won intermediate in 1925. They've been senior ever since. So 97 years at the top. If they go down, like, this is the club with Jack Lynch, Christy Ring, Patrick Horgan, you know, the all-time scorer in championship, well, right there beside TJ Reid. That would be some disaster.
It'd be an absolute disaster. I was chatting to someone who was involved in the Cork club scene the last couple of years, and he had made Glen Rovers as his favourites to win the county title this year, and it's gone the completely opposite way, and they're in a bit of trouble. And yeah, on the face of it, you'd say Kanturk obviously won the intermediate All-Ireland in 21, I think, and they're a good side. They put it up to was it the Bars in the last round? I think it was 29 points to 119, I think, in the last round of the group. So like they're bringing a bit of form in. Glen Rovers were they beaten by Bishopstown the last day? Yeah. Do you know? So they're like Kanturk's form this year is probably better than the Glen. You'd have to say. You'd be like, I don't know. You wouldn't favor one over the other as regards who you'd like or whatever. But the tradition that the Glen have. This pressure comes to that tradition as well. Imagine the pressure around the Glen this week. Like basically, there would be, and this I know this is the way it goes on in clubs. Like there'd be lads coming up to you, and you're like, are you going to be the one to get the Glen relegated? Are you going to be part of the most unwanted history that no club wants? And that brings a fair pressure with it. You'd imagine the likes of Hoggy and a few more have been around the block. Steve McDonald and the likes, that they'll be able to take that pressure on the shoulders, but younger fellas, maybe not. So there's a fine balancing act, and I think a lot of old fellas in clubs don't realise this, that it's one thing you think, I got keeping him on his toes or whatever by saying whatever, but chances are you're probably putting more pressure on his shoulders as well. So it's a delicate little balancing act there between making lads aware of what's on the line, but also potentially crippling them with the weight of history as well.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in the year, they battered Bishopstown. This was in the league. And I think Glen were missing a nice few players, and Bishopstown weren't far off full strength, but they battered them. But Bishopstown showed no real form in the first couple of games. They changed manager. Then they came out with a big performance for that 2-point win. And now Bishopstown's season is done. They're safe or whatever. But I'd say for Glen Rovers, who have a team in the next tier as well, it's either Premier Intermediate, or I don't think it's the senior on, this convoluted system that they have at Cork, and they've different like euphemistic names for every level so that everyone feels like they're important. Yeah, it's total Corkness. But like, it's so interesting reading in, I think it was in the Cork Echo, what manager Richie Keller had to say. He said, we had beaten Bishopstown a few times the last couple of years, so I think we took our eye off the ball. I think we saw Bishopstown as an easy touch, and maybe that dropped our standards and respect of the opposition. So it's a real stick to absolutely hammer his players with coming into this particular match. But when you have the likes of Deadeye, Patrick Horgan taking your frees, when you have, I think it's Dean Brosnan, and he's a good hard-running wing forward. You mentioned Stephen McDonald already.
Simon Kennefick as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and grandson of Christy Ring. Geez, can you imagine the stuff that would be potentially be said to him around the club if they go down and so on and so forth? Like, these are all good players. So and so are the Walshes and so on and so forth in the Kanturk team. Maybe we're not as familiar with the names in that Kanturk team, but you'd have to fancy Glen to produce a performance here, even though their season has been very poor.
Yeah, you would imagine so, but like there's not going to be probably more than 3 or 4 in it either way. And when games that get tight, a decision goes against you or anything like that, and you feel like your whole kind of world is caving in. But to me, this is one of the most important games of the weekend. By this one stands out by a distance, I'd have to say, just because of the history and the ramifications involved for the Glen in particular.
Hurling 1-2-3-4 says Glen Rovers team is aging. The Bishopstown game was the shock of the last 5 years in Cork. Now, to be fair to Glen, I think they've won a couple of minor county championships, so they do have more players coming. PWell74 saying, Jay's the tip man calling the Cork Championship convoluted is a bit ironic. Yeah, that's true, because like this weekend, Clonolty are facing into a senior quarterfinal, but they're also in relegation. So, you know, somebody who's just tuned in for the first time this year, they must be wondering, how on earth is that possible? But we'll come back to it later on. River Power says, is Patrick Horgan going to the media talking about going another year, putting huge pressure on the Cork manager to go with him again? It's held back Kingston. Why not build again with Cunningham? I presume you're talking about Ben Cunningham there, who scored 16 frees from 16 the last day out. Adrian McGrath says, sometimes young lads can handle the pressure much better. Glen missing players and Hammer and Bishopstown might suggest the management have not made the right calls in moving older players on. Okay, so we've already mentioned Middleton being into the semi-final, but I saw an interesting stat here that in both the 2021 and 2022 seasons, the number one seeded team, i.e. the team that got straight through to the semi-finals, SARS in 21 and Aaron's Own the year after, they didn't manage to win their semi-finals because they had that 4-week break, something that was traditionally talked about from Munster teams winning their All-Ireland semi-finals and losing it. So that's going to be a challenge for Conor Lahan and so on. Now, the ones that are on this weekend, Charleville are facing St. Finbarrs, Sarsfields are against Blackrock, and Inmakilly will meet Douglas. I mean, the Bars, look at the talent they have. I mean, Damien Cahalan in the back line, he's going to be very hard to kind of burst through at club level. Brian Hayes, Jack Cahalan, Ben Cunningham, and William Buckley is someone we saw for the under-20s this year when they were bullying Yee down in Thurles. Like, they do have serious talent, and that's going to be a huge kind of hurdle for Charleville this weekend.
It is, and Darragh Fitzgibbon was missing 2 weeks ago. Whether I think he underwent a bit of a procedure, like, so that's a great sign for Charleville that they were able to win a game without him, and that's been a kind of a team across good few championships. Teams have been able to maybe survive without their star man, but to me, like, the Bars had a good few boys over in the States. They have everyone back. They've probably had everyone back training maybe the last 2 to 3 weeks. Good performance the last day against Kanturk. And to me, they're building again. And despite the fact that Middleton are in the semi-final, I'd still have the Bars as favourites for the Cork Championship at this stage. Obviously going to be missing Ben O'Connor from last year's team because he's gone in with Munster Rugby. But Ben Cunningham and a few more, like they've a serious squad, and throw the Cahalans into the mix as well. To me, they're favourites, and I think they'll get over Charleville at the weekend fairly handsomely too.
Yeah, Charleville have some quality players. Danny O'Flynn, Jack Doyle, Jack O'Callaghan. They're all good players. But yeah, like Ben Cunningham, he'll surely be a starter for the Cork seniors next year. Am I over exaggerating that? Because like 6'3", can run, really nice hurler, brilliant free taker. Actually, in some ways, Patrick Horgan, you know, like he might be under pressure from someone like Ben Cunningham, who might actually be playing the half-forward line, because maybe they're like, okay, well, we've got a 90% free taker now, and that might put Horgan under more pressure. Now he may like have a brilliant season again and you know, kind of defy all of that, but Father Time waits for no man.
Well, that torch is going to have to be passed at some stage, and even you saw in Joe Canning's last 2 years that, like, at various stages in league games, Evan Nyland was on hitting frees, and you can't. To me, it's kind of difficult just throwing someone in the year after Horgan retires and, you know, saying this is your baby now. So I'd expect Cunningham to be starting league games and maybe even hitting frees in some championship games as well. And maybe they'll pass that torch this year. And that'll mean he's maybe better ready in a year or two when Hoggy's maybe not around. But he definitely looks like the heir apparent in that regard, as regards to the dead ball taking. Like, he was that good for the 20s that Offaly had Dan Burke, the wing forward, back in front of him under puckouts as well. Like, they thought he was that dangerous, and he's still contributing handsomely from open play. So I'd be expecting him to see a good bit of championship time for Cork next year, definitely.
Yeah, injury permitting, I'd imagine he'll become a starter fairly quickly. Sarsfields are against Blackrock. Aaron Myers, he could be the scoring threat there for Sars. Blackrock County champions just a couple of years ago. They have plenty of power and attack. Inmakilly will meet Douglas. So will Douglas finally, you know, realise some of their talent? God knows you've slated them as much as you've slated Conlara.
2 big games for the two of them at the weekend. It's just it's not necessarily slating, it's just looking at the talent they have on paper and thinking, God, these guys are probably underachieving. When you think you have Owen Cadigan, Alan Cadigan, Shane Kingston for Douglas, that's just off the top of my head. Like, there's a couple more there as well. Brian Turnbull, Douglas as well, I think, isn't he? But O'Kelly, obviously, Seamus Harnedy and a few other lads that would be involved there were over in the States. They had a good win the last day. Douglas were obviously beaten the last day, despite being through already. Probably still fancy O'Kelly to go through there. And Aaron's Own and the Sarge is very, very difficult game to call.
Yeah, so the Derry Senior Hurling Championship final is also on this weekend. Schlockneil are looking for 11 in a row. And just looking at who's played them in more recent times, it has been Kevin Lynch. Kevin Lynch is who played them in the last 4. And just to look at the difference in terms of scoring in each of those finals. Last year it was by 13 points. The year before it was only 5. The year before that it was 12. And the year before that it was 8. So in general, Schlockneil have been sort of well ahead. They have a nice team there. And I suppose for them, like, do you think they can sort of almost manage their way through Derry at this stage if they've already won 10 in a row and they're almost gearing themselves up for another tilt at Ulster?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, I'd say, because their minds, I'm sure, in the football they're very disappointed with the final against the Glen last year, where they were comprehensively beaten. So I wonder what the balance is like there. You have to kind of not go all in, but to win the football championship in Derry now, like, I'd say there's a balancing act there between the hurling. Do you know, if you get me? Like, I wonder what that balancing act is like. Is it 65-35 in the football's favour? Because even if they take the foot off a small bit, there's a high likelihood that they're still going to win the hurling championship. Does that open the doors a small bit for Kevin Lynch's? I still think with Brendan Rodgers, Cormac O'Doherty, Christy McCaig, and many more, like, when you go through the figures there and the winning margins, you'd have to say they're overwhelming favourites again this weekend. And I'd say they have a beating their bonnet over Dunley last year as well. So I'd say both teams are trying to prove a point. That, I'd say Schlockneil's a kind of a one where you're trying to make sure that you're peaking without disrespecting the Derry Championship, but that you're trying to make sure that you're ready to peak for when you meet the Antrim champions, whenever that is, because the likelihood is that they will get through Derry.
Okay, let's do our little end of year awards in terms of, like, who was the best player for each of the Liam McCarthy teams. And we'll go alphabetically. We'll start off with Antrim. I'd make the case that it's Conal Cunning. He scored 242 in 5 championship games. And I think after the season he also had with Dunloy, not that we're necessarily counting that here, I think it would probably be him. I'd say Neil McManus be right there in the conversation, only maybe injury hampered him a little bit. But I'd have Conal Cunning up in this conversation.
Yeah, Conal Cunning would definitely be right up there. Obviously brought the strong club form to his county season as well. Keelan Malloy got that wonder goal for Dunloy, obviously, in the All-Ireland Club semi-final against Thomas, has brought good form to the county as well. Thought James McNaughton, who we've always thought there's a kind of a ceiling there, that he's nearly ready to break through. Thought he came a bit closer to breaking through that this year. He's brilliant in that Dublin game as well. But I'd say if Antrim were going to get an All-Star nomination, it's not just because he's a corner forward and he did most of the scoring. I'd say Conal Cunning is the most likely. So I'd be happy enough to give him. I'd say he was marginally their best player of the year. Even though I saw Neil McManus scored 4-9, did he, in a club game for Dunley for Cushendall a couple of weeks ago. So despite stepping away, he's still playing as good as ever at 35.
Yeah. Okay. So next then, I suppose, who's next in this conversation if we're to go alphabetically?
Claire.
Yeah, let's go with Claire. God, who would be up there now?
I definitely have, over the last 2 years. I think Shane O'Donnell has done the best hurling of his career, probably in the last 2 years. And I was only chatting to someone about this yesterday. Like, score a hat-trick at 19 in an All-Ireland final to get start, that puts unbelievable pressure on your shoulders. I think he's handled it unbelievably well. And I think Lohan, to be fair, like we said, maybe some negatives about Lohan there, or some question marks. How he's handled O'Donnell in recent years has been outstanding. He's realised he had the concussion problems coming into 22, realised he didn't need to play a load of league games, played none actually. Same this year. He just realised that he needed him peaking for a championship. And, like, it's amazing what he can do. Lack of hurling, just comes in and plays as he did. I was only looking back at that catch against Dublin. Remember that one that you couldn't even see in normal time. He's like a ballet dancer on his day. I thought he was brilliant this year. I'd have him right up there with Clare's best players this year.
Where does Mark Rodgers come into this? Because, like, in terms of, like, stepping up this year, he scored 427 in total. He scored a couple of big goals. Look, Adrian McGrath says O'Donnell or Conlon. couldn't call it. I wonder, Adrian, would you throw Mark Rodgers into that conversation? Because
his own club, his own club man, who he speaks woefully high of. Rodgers is brilliant this year. This was kind of a breakthrough year for him, and they're kind of thinking, is he going to hit frees for Clare next year in the championship? He probably will. And he obviously missed 1 or 2 against Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final, but that happens. But like halfway through or 50 minutes into that All-Ireland semi-final, you're kind of thinking, Mark Rodgers is in the All-Star conversation here. So yeah, I think he had a massive season. Adam Hogan had a huge first season as well. Maybe could be young hurler of the year potentially. But I'm kind of finding it hard to get away from O'Donnell. I thought Conlon was brilliant too. Conlon could get an All-Star centre back award this year. The only thing I'd say about that, did his season tail off a tiny bit after the Munster campaign? He obviously suffered a concussion against Dublin in the All-Ireland quarter-final. Kilkenny kind of played around him, I thought, in the All-Ireland semi-final a bit, and he wasn't able to dominate the game. But you go back to the Saturday evening when he came from his brother's wedding and was man of the match against Limerick. That was probably one of the moments of the year. It would be O'Donnell for me, marginally.
Yeah, and Adrian McGrath is saying he can't give it to Mark Rodgers because his outlad will kill me if I do. PWell74 says Conlon's legs were targeted by Limerick in the Munster final and really got the better of him. But of course, if you're going to be a holding centre back, you can't just follow your man every time they go left and right. So, that's down to the centre forward as well, being cute enough to move into the right areas and expose that. Right, so next team then, Cork. Who would be player of the season there? Wow, that's actually a tough one because people say it was a year where Cork kicked on to the next level, and yet they didn't get as far as they had in the previous season. Robbie O'Flynn, I'd love to know how big his season would have been if he hadn't to pick up that injury. Patrick Horgan was obviously very good. There was some up and down within different performances. I don't know. I think it's hard to kind of pick out an obvious one for Cork.
Yeah, I thought I was only chatting to Donal O'Rourke, their coach there last week before De La Salle played, because he's involved with them. And he just said the one thing that we really were took out this year was the consistency that Cork brought. And I think that was a consistency of performance individually as well as collectively. Like Brian Roach had his moments, Rob Downey had his moments. They were consistent, maybe without being outstanding. But Hoggy was probably their star man. I thought Harnedy was brilliant. He was brilliant against Limerick. He was brilliant against Clare as well. As I said, Brian Roach had his moments too. I'm probably finding it hard to get away from Horgan, to be honest with you. And he was quiet-ish against Clare, but I thought he was brilliant against Limerick when really they needed to get over the line, and he did nearly everything possible to get them over the line. I'm probably finding it hard to get away from him.
Yeah, so I think Kieran Joyce had quite a good season, and a couple of people are mentioning him here. But I'd probably give it to Rob Downey because I thought he really grew into the season and became, this was his coming-of-age season. He's had other big performances. Remember the semi-final in 2021? He was, as the game wore on, he became more dominant than TJ Reid. So I thought that was a brilliant performance that day. But I thought this season, he really settled into it. I kind of agree with you that Patrick Horgan had some really high moments, and Brian Roach is a great call. He had an impact in midfield. But for me now, I would be going and pushing hard for Rob Downey.
Oh, I think you've said that a couple of times in recent weeks, and I think you've been overly generous now, I have to say. I think you've been overly generous if you go back.
Not for me.
Not for me. Yeah, that's fair enough. It would be still a Horgan for me, to be honest with you. And I know someone said there hurling 1, 2, 3, 4 said quiet against Clare and still got 1-4 against from play. But you remember that game? He did get 1-4 from play. But I still thought he was better against Limerick, being honest with you. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes stats can be a bit deceptive in that way too.
Yeah, and Adrian McGrath says, don't agree at all, R.E. Downey. Well, look, I really do think he was excellent as the year wore on. So do you want to push hard here now? Do you want to veto my push for Downey and say it's Horgan? I love you, veto.
I do, yeah. I wouldn't... Rob Downey was good this year, but I wouldn't stand over him being Cork's best player. I'll put it this way: is Rob Downey guaranteed? It's funny, you could probably say the same about Horgan. Is he guaranteed his place next year, and what will his place be for Cork?
He's guaranteed
7 or 3.
7.
And what about Mark Coleman?
Mark Coleman, I'd be shocked if he isn't moved to midfield or even wing forward.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Thought Dickie Dalton had his moments this year as well.
Petered out though.
Particularly in the early stages. I thought he was brilliant against Tipp. Probably petered out as the campaign went on, but that's probably something to do with the fact that he's probably been injury plagued the last couple of years, and I think the volume of games and the proximity of the game has probably caught up with him as things went on.
Traumspieler says Kieran Joyce was good. Lols, still laughing that you didn't even mention Tony Kelly for Clare. I think that's fair. Like, I mean, we talk about him plenty over the course of the years, but I don't know. I think he's had some brilliant games, but yeah, I think we were fair enough in terms of having Shane O'Donnell and John Conlon as the shortlist.
I would have said so too. Obviously, Kelly was unbelievable against Dublin. Obviously, much quieter against Kilkenny when the need was probably the greatest.
And Dublin were capped. Like, Dublin left themselves wide open.
Dublin were capped. Me, I don't know who loved that. But it's a fair point, and I thought O'Donnell consistently was brilliant throughout, and then when they really needed him against Kilkenny, I thought he was very good as well. And that's probably what tips the scales over Conlon, over Mark Rogers, Adam Hogan, and to a lesser extent, I'd say Tony Kelly.
Okay, Dublin. I'm going to say at the start of the year, I put me sort of neck on the block and I said Paddy Doyle was going to be one of the young players of the year. And I know Kelly got the hat-trick off him and all that kind of stuff, but I don't blame him for that because Dublin left themselves so wide open. I'd be putting him in the shortlist there. There's probably a few others you could mention. Donald Burke had some great moments. I think Danny Sutcliffe was very good as the season wore on. Mark Rogan had a very good season, I felt. Is there anyone else you would be including in that shortlist?
Yeah, I thought Keane O'Sullivan had a really good year as well. Very dangerous at different stages. Nice eye for goal. Paul Crummy was very good against Clare that day as well. I don't know if it's because he went off early against Clare or what, but I thought Donald Burke was brilliant this year. And maybe it would have been a bit of a different game had he stayed on the pitch. But I thought he was easily Dublin's best player this year, I have to say. Thought he was outstanding. Even the score from underneath the Hogan against Wexford to win it. I think it was the winning score. I thought Donald Burke was brilliant. And his tallies would stand up against anyone in the country, I'd say, throughout the year. The fact that he went off against Clare early that day, I think maybe is somewhat people are taking it away from his overall season, but I thought he was brilliant.
Adrian McGrath says the quiet against Kilkenny isn't fair. Kelly had to play much deeper once Taylor got hurt.
Yeah, but just on that, but like, was he on the ball? Was he on the ball? Did he influence the game? I'm not saying he doesn't have to score 4 or 5 points to influence the game. I'm just saying, did he influence the game a lot?
Yeah, well, I think this is like when you talk about Clare, if you say anything other than Tony Kelly's the greatest player Clare have ever produced, you're insulting. And of course we're not. We think he's an excellent player, but that's a couple of semi-finals where it hasn't happened. And it's not like we're saying he's not a big game player. Of course he is. Look at the performances he's had against Limerick in those Munster finals, or, of course, the All-Ireland final going back many moons. Of course he's a big game player. But we can't ignore that, he didn't have the influence he wanted in those games. And, you can say, the ball wasn't put in his hand. But, you go out there, especially you're a top player like that, you have to make sure that you get yourself into the game. So, I don't know. I wouldn't go with that. You can't criticise TK, lad, says Limerick man, P-Well 74.
Hey, you can't criticise too many Limerick lads either, P-Well.
Oh, between Limerick and Clare, they're the two most sensitive supporter groups that you could ever come across. I think it's, they're out there going kind of sort of Springfield and Shelbyville. Oh, they're like this, they're like that. You're the exact same, lads. You're the exact same. You're both trigger happy all the time. Emily89 says, Donald Burke, any other answer is wrong. Huge loss against Clare and has to be Donald Burke, says Joe Butler. Traumspieler says, Kelly is being judged to different standards than every other player. It's a testament to how good he is, I guess. Yeah, I suppose to some degree. You do expect the best from someone that good, but in those games, you expect at least, he'll have some sort of an impact. Even if it's a little bit quieter, you want to have that, decent impact. His last semi-finals versus Galway by 2, Kilkenny by 2, he's been very poor in all, says ML89, savage in 2013, but that's a while ago now. But look, he has had some unbelievable performances in other big games, so I wouldn't be taking a pop at him per se. But we always try to be realistic when we're reviewing these things.
Yeah,
I think we always try to be fair.
Yeah, and I would say that Brian Lohan generally has gotten the best out of Tony Kelly. I would say Brian Lohan has gotten more out of Tony Kelly in the last couple of years than even his 2013 season. Obviously, they won the All-Ireland in 2013. Remember the performance COVID against Wexford? Absolutely outrageous. Where he was putting points over from the sideline. Obviously, that Munster final performance against Limerick last year. There's outside of a couple of games that we've probably mentioned there where he hasn't been to the standards that we expect, I think he's been unbelievable over the last 3 or 4 years, and that's thrown a fairly serious ankle injury into the mix as well.
What about Galway?
Galway this year, right? We gave them a C in our when we went through our grades. Kevin Cooney was a player that definitely we mentioned very, very favourably. Different type of player. Keen on Fatty as well. Cooney, I just thought was, even Cooney's set up for Cathal Mannion's goal in the All-Ireland semi-final was brilliant. He probably missed several chances as well at different stages, but I thought he showed up really well as regards a new player coming in. Dottie Burke had a couple of moments, but was he as consistent as he normally would be? Probably not. Sean Lannan was really good out around the middle of the park. Evan Nyland had some moments.
Conor Whelan,
All-Ireland,
Whelan.
Yeah, All-Ireland semi-final aside, Conor Whelan had some outrageous performance. Man of the match against Tipp. He's man of the match in the Leinster final that they lost as well. And when you go through, like, who's going to get an All-Star for Galway this year? Probably just Conor Whelan, you would say, realistically. And that was after
goals.
Yeah, that was after Jackie Tyrrell called him the one-trick pony. It'd be Conor Whelan again. He was brilliant.
Yeah, Fergus Butler, Whelan, no contest for Galway, and Whelan lads, move on. But
the issue I'm having here is the amount of forwards we're picking. But I'm sure the backs will have their day eventually.
Yeah, Joe Butler also adds in that it's Conor Whelan. Next county to mention is it going to be Limerick, actually? Let's just do this alphabetically. Yeah, so Kilkenny, actually, I should say. Who's coming to mind for you?
When Adrian Mullen was on the field at different stages, he was very good, but he wouldn't be in the mix for the All-Star kind of conversation. Listen, it's Owen Cody, like, sure, realistically. He's probably still in the hurler of the year conversation. You would say that this was the year where he took the Kilkenny senior team probably by the scruff of the neck, and this is the year where you're thinking, okay, I'm not saying he's going to have the same career as TJ Reid, but this was the year where he took it on and said, yeah, I'm going to be the man to lead Kilkenny forward. Yeah, no, Hugh Lawler was brilliant as well. Hugh Lawler's definitely up there. Mikey Butler had a good year, even though when we get into the All-Star conversation, it's going to be interesting to see what that full back line is. They both had good seasons. Paddy Deegan had a good final, a bit of kind of retribution maybe after the 2022 final. Who else are we looking at around? Yeah, he's definitely going to be remembered for that moment of absolute brilliance, saving for Peter Duggan in the semi-final. I'd say it probably would come down to Hugh Lawler, probably, and Owen Cody. But
you'd have to give props to Tom Phelan as well for a bit of a breakthrough season.
Yeah, sure. He was man of the match at stages of the All-Ireland final. Do you know what I mean?
3 points scored, Adrian McGrath says, Clare and Limerick is one population with two teams, best rivalry in GAA by a mile, ferocious with little or no bitterness. Well, the way ye have such hair-trigger reactions to any criticism, I'm not sure. It's just, I don't know, maybe you've no bitterness between you, although the Clare Times social media page would suggest there is. Joe Butler says, Hugh Lawler. TOS1986 says, can we skip Wexford, please? Yeah, no. To be honest, we're going to be struggling there. Traumspieler says, Owen Murphy, Kilkenny, arguably. Owen Cody missing in All-Ireland final if you want to apply the Tony Kelly's standard to him.
I wouldn't have said that now. I wouldn't have said that. Like, I know he got the goal. He flashed the goal across. Remember that brilliant piece where he did the dummy hand pass, banged the ball off the ground? Like, Limerick had space gobbled up in the Kilkenny forward, and I still thought he was very good. In the All-Ireland final. I wouldn't take too much off his season for the All-Ireland final. Was he still one of Kilkenny's best players in the All-Ireland final? I would say he was.
I'd give it to Hugh Lawler, slightly ahead of Owen Cody. And I think Owen Cody had a brilliant season. What did he score altogether? 521. So yeah, he's right up there, but I'd give it to Hugh Lawler.
What would definitely put some pluses in Hugh Lawler's column is, like, Aaron Gillan is looking like he's going to be hurler of the year. Hugh Lawler kept him relatively quiet in the All-Ireland final for the second year.
Conor Whelan quiet.
Yeah, and kept Gillan to 3 points the year previous, and got the better of that duel, and probably got the better of the duel in this year's final as well. I'm still finding it very hard not to give it to Owen Cody, though.
Okay, Hugh Lawler it is. So we've confirmed that it is Hugh Lawler. Okay, next team that we're going to discuss is... It's going to be Limerick. So let's give it to Aaron Gillan and leave it at that, yeah?
Now, I have the thing about Limerick here is Gillane was outstanding, but I don't know. I have a real soft spot for Dan Morrissey, I have to say. And I thought he was unbelievable this year, particularly when they weren't going well. There was a couple of lads that really drove the ship forward when they weren't going well in Munster. Dan Morrissey was one. The brother Tom was another. Dermot Burns, Kyle Hayes, and probably Aaron Gillane. They kept the ship afloat. Flanagan to a lesser extent as well. They kept the ship afloat when they were in really, really choppy waters. And what
Darrell
Will
O'Donovan
O'Donovan...
has to be mentioned as well.
Yeah, Darrell O'Donovan was outstanding too. And even Will O'Donoghue, I should have had O'Donovan in the mix with those other guys as well. And the way Will O'Donoghue came in and slotted in at number 6, and after 25 minutes of the Galway game, you're kind of thinking, yeah, it looks like this guy's probably played there. From then on, it probably looks like this guy's played there forever. So I thought he was absolutely outstanding too. I thought Dan Morrissey, though, filled a hell of a lot of holes that were left from Sean Finn's absence. And as good as Gillane was, and he could be hurler of the year, but there's a personal kind of opinion in this, I just thought Dan Morrissey was outstanding from start to finish this year.
Yeah, and Adrian McGrath says Donovan, 1 vote for every game he played well in. Like he did, yeah, he was brilliant all year. Traum Spieler, totally agree with Verney, RE Dan Morrissey. What a player, never fouls, so composed. I think it's between Dermot Burns and Aaron Gillane, if I'm honest. And like, I think Gillane has to get hurler of the year this year, which would mean that Patrick's well are racking up a ridiculous amount of hurler of the year awards. And Colin O'Halloran says, when you list them all out already, I'm sickened about next year. Lynch and Finn out too, Christ. Yeah, like, look, I'd be pushing for Gillane here, but, you know, I kind of rammed through Hugh Lawler in the last one. So if you want the next veto here, go ahead.
Well, I tell you what's really worrying for the Chasing Pack here. We're after naming about 10 lads who had brilliant years. And that is really, really worrying for everyone. Because to me, like, Dan Morrissey's early 30s now, and you're thinking, Father Time should maybe start catching up with him. It definitely is not catching up with him, and he's an absolute specimen of a man. And as one of the viewers said there, he just doesn't foul. He just does everything right. And it's not spectacular. It's just, he just does everything really, really well, and is able to tie down some of the best forwards in the country. And then you have Sean Finn to come back. Then you have, if Cian Lynch continues his All-Ireland final form into next year, that's really worrying. The most successful captain in hurling's history is going to be back, Declan Hannon, as well. Like, it is, you'd have to say, like, it is very, very worrying. There's no sign, especially based on the last couple of games of this year, there's no sign that they're going over the top. No sign whatsoever. And Toss 1986 didn't even mention Hayes. Like, to me, we did mention Hayes, and to me, like, he is up there. He's in the shortlist for hurler of the year. I'm just saying Dan Morrissey's probably a personal preference with me. Maybe it's the full backline club or something, I don't know. But for me, it's Dan Morrissey, and that is absolutely no slight on anything Aaron Gillane did this year.
What do you mean full backline club? You're more of a centre forward these days.
I know. I'm going back the other end again.
Are you?
Yeah.
So holding the centre back scoreless wasn't good enough for them.
Oh, I don't even know if it did that, to be honest with you.
Okay, next team to talk about, Tipperary. Sure, look, we could be here all day.
We could be here all day trying to find out who's the best player.
Like, at times it was Jake Morris because he was racking up goals. At times it was Alan Tynan because he was, producing very good performances. And at times it was nobody because Tipperary weren't going all that well. Like, even Gerard O'Connor, I thought, was really, really good. And then he got the injury, and that probably stymied his progress a little bit. Is there anyone that you think is head and shoulders above the rest in terms of Tipperary?
No, I thought
Noel McGrath. Reece Shelley had a couple of great games as well. Yeah,
Reece Shelley probably announced himself. Like, he was treading puck outs through the eye of a needle there at different stages in games. And it's hard to say he's nailed down the number 1 spot, but you would fancy him to be number 1 next year ahead of Barry Hogan. And it'd be interesting to see whether Brian Hogan is back on the scene as well, and whether they have 3 keepers with a lot of experience vying for that spot. Tall Noel McGrath had his moments. I thought Seamus Kennedy had his moments this year as well at different stages in a new position at times in the half forward, and then he was playing wing back sometimes as well. Tynan was brilliant. In the first couple of games, I'd say, in Munster, probably tailed off a bit. Gerard O'Connor had his moments too. I just thought, I know he was tied down at certain stages, but even when he got going against Galway, Jake Morris was very, very lively, just struggled to get his hands on the ball. Like, Jake Morris was threatening to run absolute riot against Limerick. He was threatening to beat Limerick by himself at stages there. And if you're looking at someone who's probably, maybe it's not an award that anybody wants, but the most improved player, or a player who really made a stamp this year, probably would be Jake Morris for me. And there's plenty of signs that maybe he could lead a Tipp forward line going forward for the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, other players that impressed me at different times. And look, let's get this straight from the get-go. Tipperary underperformed massively against Waterford and Galway. So there's no player from Tipperary that played brilliantly in all 6 games this year. But I'd say Brian O'Mara really established himself this year. Michael Breen going back to the full backline belatedly after years of me harping on about it. I thought he had, for the most part, a pretty good season back there. I think Owen Connolly really developed as a player this year. I think Dan McCormick had a pretty solid season. Like, there was times when he was man marking and did some really good jobs. Wasn't it against Limerick in Thurles that he had a great day against Grode Hegarty?
Grode Hegarty, yeah.
For example. Other players, I thought Conor Stapleton had his moments as well. Jason Ford, of course, getting injured that day against Cork, and so he was out for a little bit of time. But yeah,
I think from a Tipperary point of view, Shane, there, and I think there's a bit of promise in this. Some lads had moments at different stages. Lads showed that they were capable of performing at that level. The thing is with Limerick is that lads do that every day. You know what I mean? And but like, I'd agree with you. In the likes of Conor Stapleton, definitely had his moments. It's just probably been more consistent, and it's the proximity of the games. It's been able to do it every week, every second week. It's been able to do it over those 4 games in Munster. That was probably a major problem that Tipp had this year. Maybe that's an S&C deficit that they will maybe narrow or close in on over the next couple of years. But at least there were different lads that stepped up at different stages, and to me that's promising.
Yeah, so I'd probably just about give it to Jake Morris.
Yeah. I'd go with Jake Morris as well, yeah.
Yeah, and PL74, all he needed, presumably talking about Dan McCormick, was a saddle for Mark and Hegarty. Hey, you do what you need to do.
I think that's a compliment.
Yeah, and it's not like the Limerick players are shrinking violets either, so come on, lads. Okay, we've only a couple of more teams left. Okay, who's next in the list here? I presume it's Westmeath. So we probably haven't seen quite
Waterford, I'd say. Waterford first.
Oh, yeah, Waterford. Nobody. They really didn't have that great a season, did they?
I'd give Mark Fitzgerald a lot of props now, I have to say, for his first kind of real season in the team. Thought he was really solid, mostly in the full back line. Showed plenty of signs that he could be there for the guts of the next decade or so. There weren't too many players that came away with credit across the whole season. Patrick Fitzgerald only got his first start. I think it's in the Tipp game. He ended up with maybe 3 points that day. Desi ended up with something like 1-3 that day. Who else are we talking here? Like, even for that Tipp game, they were missing Prunty, they were missing Ozzy. Were they missing Jamie Byrne that day as well? Billy Nolan was good in the goals, and he was very good out the field the day against Tipperary as well, in his first county game ever out the pitch at senior level. I'd probably be Mark Fitzgerald for me, for a fella who came in from the cold and made a fair impact in defence.
Yeah, do you know what? I'd be happy enough to go with that because they were so unimpressive overall. Yeah, no problem. We'll go with that. Westmeath then. I suppose there's players that people have heard of, the likes of, I suppose, Angus Clark, and you've got a couple of the guys there in the forward line as well, including Killian Doyle. The people, they would be somewhat familiar with. It's probably another tough one because of all the teams, we probably just didn't see them quite as much as some of the other teams. So there's no point in hiding from that. Is there anyone that's jumping out to you that you probably came across more than others this year?
Yeah, no, there is. Tommy Doyle was good this year. He's good most years. Niall Mitchell was struggling with injury and came in and got those 2 goals against Wexford, crucial goals. Funnily enough, the player I'm going to go for that was their best player of the year actually ended up getting sin-binned against Wexford, but he was brilliant throughout the year. Dara Egerton, who's been around the scene for a good while, he had a really, really consistent year. And I was only chatting Joe Fortune there recently about this as well, and he said as well, he just thought he was outstanding over the course of the year, league and championship, really solid. He made a block, or some sort of a mad block or save. Forget who it was from who against Wexford in a real crucial stage of the game where they could have went 9 or 10 down again. I'd be giving it to Darragh Egerton.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Niall Mitchell is too far off it either, and Kieran Doyle is putting up plenty of scores this year. So there's probably a few there, all right, but I whatever it was this year, I just didn't quite see as much of them. Sinbin says, Cahill O'Halloran, rugby getting to you?
Well, he was sent off for 10 minutes. Is it not the Sinbin? Black card, like it's the same thing, like.
Yeah, I know, but people don't like the rugby terminology around here. Whatever happened, Gerard Brown, he was looking great for Tipperary a few years back. He got a knee injury at the start of the year, so that ruled him out for the entire season. He did come back for Cashel King Cormac's recently. Let's see then. We have to talk about Wexford. So, wow. Who do we even... I mean, wow.
Yeah, James Lauder came in, obviously, in the goals for his first season. Thought he acquitted himself quite well. Liam Ryan was carrying a knock throughout the campaign. Dee O'Keefe didn't play that much at different stages. Conor Mack didn't play that much. When Chin was on the field, he was very good. He obviously missed the first game against Galway. At times, Rory O'Connor showed up really, really well, but probably wasn't that consistent. Yeah, struggling to find. Maybe you might just get one of their team sheets up there. Maybe there's someone kind of obvious that we're forgetting. Hanlon was good at stages, but I think Niall O'Brien done him for the 2 goals under 2 high balls against Westmeath.
I think
Foley was good at times.
I mean, there was days when maybe Lee Chin did put up scores. Liam McGovern got 2-1 against Kilkenny. That wasn't so bad. Rory O'Connor had a few days where he put up like 5 points one day, 3, a couple of those were frees, 4 another day. A couple of the young lads did okay. I suppose Connor Devitt did okay this season. I think there's a case to be made for nobody being named for Wexford.
Oh my God.
It was just that, it was that disappointing a season.
Jesus Christ. I don't know. I can't pick an outstanding player. Can you just fly through the team sheet really, really quickly there, would say, for the Westmeath game? Is there someone obvious that we're missing? Like, at stages during the league, I thought Charlie McGuckin was very good. He tailed off. He didn't actually play in that last game against Kilkenny. A couple of the younger faces kind of impressed at different stages, but you wouldn't say they were outstanding or their best player throughout the year.
Okay, I'll read out the team that started against Wexford. So James Lawler, Shane Reck, Liam Ryan, Conor Devitt, Ian Carty, who played a couple of games, all right, Matthew O'Hanlon, Simon Donoghue, Jack O'Connor, Cahill Dunbar, Liam McGovern, Lee Chin, Oisin Foley, Rory O'Connor, Conor MacDonald, and Mikey Dwyer. Charlie McGuckin came in there, Conor Hearn came in, and Dee O'Keefe came in. Look, I think it should nearly be an insult. It's like, when Ireland lost to France there last week and didn't kick a ball, and lucky that France didn't score 3 or 4 more goals, and you see Chidozie Ogbene getting man of the match, and he's almost embarrassed to get it. I think it would nearly embarrass any Wexford player here to call them player of the season. I think we just straight up don't give it to anybody.
By God, the fair cannon fodder for next year already, but I don't know. I think it'd probably be tokenistic to pick out someone, being honest with you. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, okay. So that's it in terms of the teams there. That's our awards for this year, if you can call them awards for a couple of the teams anyway. Hard to give it back after the Westmeath match, says Cahill O'Halloran. To be fair, they did all right to get that victory over Kilkenny, even though Kilkenny didn't really need anything from that game, but they still did okay. Tipperary quarterfinals are on this weekend. I'll just read out the 4 fixtures and I'll let you start off then. Killadangan will meet Holy Cross Ballycahill. Lockmore Castleiney will meet Rossgrey. Toomevara up against Clonoulty Rossmore. And probably the best quarterfinal of the lot is Drummond against Thurles Sarsfields on Sunday. That's a real clash of the coffee there. Seamus Callan and Paddy Maher. Seamus Callan's obviously going to be playing. Paddy Maher is going to be managing Thurles Sarsfields. They run Heyday Coffee between them inside in Liberty Square in Thurles. So the clash of the beans there.
Some picture opportunity there. Both of them with the finger up like this, a cup of coffee in the other hand. Like,
hey, and Cathal Barrett running a coffee shop in one of the other quarterfinals, 65-degree coffee.
That's a fact, yeah. Just going down through the quarterfinals there, I'll be straight with you. Find it very hard to see anything but a resounding enough Killadangan win, being honest with you. And similarly for Lockmore against Rossgrey, like you're looking at a team that won a county final a couple of years ago against a team that was, in the Seamus O'Reen last year. To me, there's a big gulf in class, but in those 2 quarterfinals, I think it's Thurles and Drum, is it, in the other one, and Thurles and Drum is very, very
Two
difficult
against
to call.
Clounty.
Yeah, Toom against Clounty. Toom are probably a coming team. Clounty is, as we said before, they're trying to avoid going back into that relegation kind of quagmire. I probably see Toomevara coming out of that one, being honest. And in Thurles and Drum, Drum had shown great form in the group stages. Thurles hadn't, but Thurles looked like they're finding something when they need to find it. Oh, that's the tastiest of the games at the weekend by a fair distance, I'd say.
Yeah, Drum's last game, they lost, and they lost heavily to JK Brackens, but they were already through, so it was a bit of a dead rubber. Do you read into that? Do you not? I don't know. What do you make of those Tipperary teams that are right there, seeping into the Offaly side of things, Toomevara and Roscrea and so forth? Do you have a bit of graw for them, or do you hate them?
I wouldn't have any issue with Toomevara. Wouldn't be the biggest fan of Ross Gray, but honest with you. Well, I wouldn't be the biggest fan of Ross Gray because my mother always brought me up on the 1984 All-Ireland final, and everyone from Offaly driving back to Ross Gray, and they had the red and white flags out after Cork beat us in the All-Ireland in the centenary final. And they were obviously weren't Cork flags, they were Ross Gray flags, who I think were going well enough at the time. So no, I never had a graw for Ross Gray after that. Never really had an issue with Toomevara. We would have played them a decent bit down through the years. That's different. Ross Gray is bordering what I would say real Offaly, whereas Toomevara is bordering Moneygall, which is like that's I wouldn't view that as real Offaly as much, and some of the people there would consider themselves Tipperary, like, whereas in like Ross Gray is Tipperary, like hardcore Tipperary. So I wouldn't have the same opinion of Ross Gray as I would have for Toomevara. They're slightly different.
In the late 89, some amount of inter-county lads own coffee places now. It's taken the place of the inter-county player owning a pub.
100%. It's totally is, and it probably just shows you how society has kind of changed as well. You used to maybe meet for a pint, and people do meet for pints or whatever, but meeting for a coffee or grabbing a coffee, that's the thing in 2023. I wonder what the next thing will be. What'll it be in 2035? Like what will we be meeting for then? Or I catch you over or whatever. The thing is, I've tasted it, so I doubt it. But if you go to the States and kind of suss out what's going on in different cities over there, chances are 5 years later, the big thing that was in the States then will be the big thing in Ireland now. We're just usually a bit slower to catch on.
Yeah, and in some things, given what catches on in America, and if you look at some of their politics, maybe we're better off being a few years behind them. But anyway, that's a point for another day. So I'm going to go through some of these fixtures, and feel free to jump in whenever. But Kildangan against Holy Cross there. So Holy Cross, they're playing in their first Tipperary quarter-final since they last won a mid-title in 1999. So this is a big day for them. So the obvious players are Brian O'Mara, who'll be centre-back, and maybe Billy Seymour will go centre-forward on him and look to pick off a few points. At the other end, Cathal Barrett is probably most likely going to play centre forward. So is it going to be Joe Gallagher who will try to pick him up, or will they say, okay, Alan Flynn, you come in and man mark Cathal Barrett there? And that'd be interesting. Two lads who have been in the cornerback shake-up for Tip in recent years before Flynn was let go by Liam Cahill could be up against each other there. I'm just not sure who's going to pick up all these forwards that Kildangan have. You know, the likes of Paul Flynn, who's always really good at club level, Sean Hayes, Ty Gallagher bursting through from midfield. I know there's good forwards for Holy Cross too, Dara Woods and Ben Hennessy, but like you're saying, I can't but see Kildangan coming through here. A little comment there from River Power.
Yeah, he just says, I was asking, like, what will we be going for a cup of or whatever in time? He just says, want to go for a cup of stem cell treatment. You just never know. Like, I wonder as well, like, where do you think we're going with cash? I know this is a mad conversation to have. Like, will cash still exist in 10 years?
And will we have a sort of a global currency rather? Like, if it's going to be a digital currency, why would you need to have a digital currency in, you know, euro and dollar and all this kind of stuff? It's probably all heading down that route eventually. I'm not saying for good or for bad, but it probably is. How about we go for an old cup of elective unnecessary surgeries? You know, and a cup of self-identification as something unusual. You know, it's all heading that way too. Lockmore against Roscrea. So, like, again, Roscrea haven't been... When would you say Roscrea were last in a county quarter-final?
Maybe around Dermot Fitzgerald's time. Maybe around 2004.
2005, just not far off.
Yeah, no, I remember because we'd always have the Midland Tribune at home, and they'd always have a lot of the North Tipperary stuff. So you'd always have Ross Gray's results, and you kind of just following maybe a bit of a decline over a period of time. But I do remember them being quite strong back then.
Yeah, so it's a fair old step up from Ross Gray to get out of their group after only coming up from intermediate last year, and obviously they did very well at that level, getting to the Munster final. Lockmore, they're used to dealing with teams who like to work it through the lines, which certainly Ross Gray like to do. And I suppose you're expecting the McGraths and the Connollys to kind of get the job done here. Just in terms of Tumivara against Clonoulty, I was on Tipcast yesterday. You can get that show if you like, based on the Nina Guardian YouTube page. But I'm just going to play a small little clip where I was chatting to Paul Carroll of Tipp FM and Shane Brophy of the Nina Guardian. Yes, it's just a minute or two here. Paul, like Jack Ryan, I'm looking forward to seeing what he's like in the stadium now. I know he had some injury issues earlier in the year, but like this should be the stage for him.
Yeah, and he only scored a point against Mullinahone, but he was kind of influential. He won a few big puck outs towards the end, and yeah, he's an exciting prospect just in terms of he has all the kind of physical gifts. He's very tall, he's quick, and he's strong under the high ball. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see him, but I'd be similar to Shane. This is proper 50-50. I'd love to be able to say, oh, this is why this team will definitely win, but you just can't. Like Ross Gray coming in off one older 3 group games, so and going well underage, like I'm sure there's great momentum and great atmosphere around the club. And Clonoulty had the kind of opposite in the group stage. They drew their first game against Bursley in a poor performance, and then lost to Thurles and lost to Killadangan. But you kind of always felt, oh, once it gets to knockout, Clonoulty will be different, and we kind of saw that there last weekend. Beating Mullinahone, they looked a completely different team. Now they still kind of made hard work of it for a finish, but yeah, this is proper 50-50. Really looking forward to it. So much good kind of matchups around. Like if it's Robert Doyle on Andrew Ryan, like that's a great matchup inside, and Darren McCarthy, like who's going to pick him up, and Enda Heffernan back there as well. Jack Delaney having another fine year. So really looking forward to this one. And yeah, like there's just so many good matchups across even the Toom half back line. Let's say like who's going to be picking up Conor Hammersley and Cathal Burke. Cathal Burke was brilliant against Mullinahone again. So yeah, I can't wait for this one. It's going to be a great double header down in Semple Stadium on Sunday, and yeah, I can't wait for this one to get on.
Like if you're looking for Tipperary pointers, you see if maybe Enda Heffernan goes on Jack Delaney, it's a test for Jack. How Josh McCarthy probably have a different test if it's Conor Hammersley at centre forward, because Conor tends to drift left and right into pockets of space. So yeah, like there's so many areas where both teams can think, oh, that we can get a bit of joy.
Yeah, so you can watch plenty more of that if you go to the Tipcast show. River Power says Young Hall with Toom is very exciting. Everybody talking about McCarthy, but Young Hall looks serious. Covers the pitch very well. Tell St. Paddy to get a good look at him. Obviously, the brother is with the Tip under-20s next year. So calling him Young Hall. I'm trying to remember what is his first name, because I know I've seen him, but I'm just going to look it up here.
It's proper country. That's what you do. And so sometimes you can still be called Young whatever. Like I'd still be called Young Verney at home, even though I'm 37 next month. Like, do you know what I mean?
There's nothing young about you. Yeah, where is his surname? Adam Hall. I was thinking it was Adam Hall, but I didn't want to commit to it. So Toom, actually, their form. They've beaten Killer One, who obviously are kind of under strengths this year and have been unimpressive and are in the relegation. Mulcarkey Burris and Ross Gray. So, that's good form. But the last time that they met in the knockout stages was 2018, and Clonoulty beat them and also went on to win the title. So maybe they'll be looking at this as a springboard. And, of course, winning the county title means they'd avoid the relegation. But last week, Clonoulty beat Mullinahone, and Conor Hammersley was mentioned there. Since he's come back from America, he's been excellent. Robert Doyle is starting to get the scores now that he's moved full forward. He wasn't getting them earlier in the year, but he certainly is now. And then I suppose Drum and Thurles Sarsfields. I watched Thurles Sarsfields, very impressive against Nina, even though they let Nina in last week. Will we see more from Conor Stapleton on Sunday? Because he is a Semple Stadium type player. They have a really good bench. Will Paddy Creedon come back into the starting lineup? Probably not, because they performed so well without him last week. And for Drum, they can't make a hero of Ronan Maher because they'll lose if they do. Drum were very poor against JK Brackens, but in games before that, they were really impressive. Tommy Nolan's been really good. Seamus Callanan will obviously have a big part to play here. But if you were the Drum lineup, you'd probably make sure not to put Seamus Callanan in full forward, because Ronan Maher will be more or less sitting in front of him, and he'll have a man marker behind. Maybe Dennis Maher, maybe not Dennis Maher. I'm not entirely sure. but I don't think you'd be allowing Seamus Callanan to be double marked from the get-go here. I'd be more inclined to play him on the wing. What would you think?
Yeah, no, or maybe even centre, to be honest with you, where he started off his career, but I definitely wouldn't be. I might move him in at stages, but I would definitely wouldn't be plunking him in there where there's not going to be that much space to manoeuvre. And as I said, the thing about it is you can't make a hero of Ronan Maher because he will just sit back into that pocket. He'll deny a lot of space. His deliveries are very, very good as well. So, Drum need to try and keep Ronan Maher's possessions down to something between 12 and 15. If he gets up near the 20s, they're in a bit of bother. But I want you to call the 4 quarter-final winners. I'm going for Thurles against Drum. I'm going for Toom against Clonalty. Killadangan will beat Holy Cross. And I honestly think Lockmore Castellini will just have too much for Ross Gray. Too much experience, too much nous, too much know-how. So they're my 4.
Yeah, I go Killadangan, Lockmore, Clonalty, actually. So that's where we differ. And I'm fairly torn over the Thurles against Drum game because, I can't, even though they were missing Ronan Maher that day against Killadangan the first time out, they got a nice, this was the first round game. They got a nice start, but then they were battered for the rest of the game. And they were good against Nina, but let them back in. And Nina were fairly poor now, I have to say. I'm very torn on that. Tommy Nolan's had some really good form. I think the 2 Campions, they haven't quite shown what they're about just yet in this championship season. Could be a big performance from them there. Do you know what? I'll go with Drum just to mix it up a little bit there. I'm not entirely convinced, but I'll just about go with Drum. The Offaly quarterfinals are on this weekend. Rhinas against Cool Derry and Burr against Shinrone. Who's winning these? And by how many will Burr win?
Oh, yes, I hope so anyway. I'll just start with Kildare Rhinos first. So Kildare are managed by Dennis Byrne for Kilkenny, and they've been going poor. They've been going poor up until the last day against Yeah, Tipp and Kilkenny, and we must chat to him at some stage because I can't imagine the crack at the time when he transferred. Remember chatting to Eddie Brennan about going training Mike Harkey, and he just said he'd hand over the face like that going through Urlingford to make sure nobody sees him crossing the border, tongue in cheek, obviously. But Kildare had been going poor until they played Belmont the last day, where they delivered, a season's best by a country mile. Kevin Conley's back showing a bit of form. Brian Carroll is coming in off the bench most of the time. He got a goal and a couple of points the last day. Still must be 40-ish at this stage. Still contributing quite handsomely. You look at this on paper and you think, Rhinos were 3 in a row champions a couple of years ago. Kildare had a county title in their grasp in the 2021 final against Rhinos and were just caught at the end, or end up beating. I think they were beaten by a point in the end. Now, a couple of the likes of Kevin Brady, maybe he's gone back playing intermediate since then. But Rhinos have a decent turnover of bodies in the last couple of years as well. I know Ronan Hughes is down in Australia. Still have the main cohort, the likes of Ben Keneally, Matthew Maloney's back, centre back. Stephen Wynn is still in the full back line. Conor Clancy in the goals, and they still have Aidan Tracy up in the forwards. But this is Rhinos definitely wouldn't want to be taking this for granted because Kildare, you know what you're going to get with Kildare on a given day. Even sometimes with limited resources, they'll perform above themselves. Just that rural kind of club mentality, which you have to kind of admire. This is only a 2 or 3 point game. I think Rhinos need to be wary of this one, but I do think they'll get over it. I do think they'll get over Kildare. In the other one, you have county champions Shinrone, obviously first time county champions last year. Did it the hard way, beat Rhinos, dethroned Rhinos, came from well back to beat Belmont in the semi-final and beat Kilcormac in the final. They've been good this year until the last 15 minutes against Ballinamere, where they hit a good few wides, made a few changes, and Ballinamere ended up hitting the last 7. And they topped the group and ended up in the semi-final, cinching their own through the longer route, through the quarter-final. Burr have been good at stages this year. They've played every game so far this year without Owen Cattle, and they were beaten by Rhinos by 4 points. Kilcormac beat them, I think, 4 as well. He is back in action now. He hasn't heard since doing the hammer against Tipperary in the qualifiers. A bad hammer, bad job. He's back, obviously very limited, no game time, basically, coming into this game. And I'm sure Shinrone are probably going to put a man marker on him. Emmett Nolan scored 6 points for Bird last day. He's based in Dubai. He flew back for the last game. He's flying back for this game as well, I believe.
This game up for that.
No, I definitely am not. Anyway, this game is on a bit of a knife edge, and it's funny. Whoever wins this game could go on a run. And like we beat Shinrone in the 2019 quarter final, having not played that well to that point, ended up getting to a county final and should have probably won the county final. And you'd say the similar could happen for either Burr or Shinrone on Sunday. I should listen. Very, very, very difficult game to call. Wouldn't be a bit surprised if it went to extra time. Funnily enough, Jason Sampson, who's played centre back all year with Offaly, he's back up in the forwards with Shinrone. His brother Killian is wing back. They've performed quite well given the pressure of being county champions, I'd say. Very difficult game to call. I'm not even going to try and call it, to be honest with you, given my allegiances.
Yeah, and like Shinrone have only ever been to 2 finals, winning 1 in 2022. But like you would consider yourselves, 35 times finalists, 22 times winners, the blue bloods of Offaly, wouldn't you? I know Cool Derry have the most titles, but you'd have that notion about yourselves.
I don't know if you're trying to have like an undercut kind of a dig at us or whatever, but we're, as I said in the show recently, we're gone 15 years without winning a county title, and that's a massive amount of time. I think the previous biggest gap was from 71 to 91, and then they went on a massive run probably from 91 to 2008. It's gas. We were going for 5 in a row in 09. And you're going 1 minute, you're going for 5 in a row, and then you're 15 years without a title, and that's kind of how it can happen. The county final is in Burr this year as well, which is huge motivation for everyone involved in the club. Like basically, we'll have it'll be all hands on deck for that day. But to be nothing better than to have Burr back in the final. There hasn't been a final played there since 06. We beat Coolderry in a replay that day.
Just imagine if you had to basically open up the pitch for a couple of teams that you hate and watch them win the county title in your own backyard. God, that'd be sickening now.
Yeah, we were the last team to win it there, so it would be brilliant if we were back there. But yeah, very, very, very difficult game to call. Shinrone, did we play them last year? Don't think we played them last year. They beat us handsomely in 2021. Very tough game to call, and I would fancy the winners to go on a run and maybe get to a final. Who the winners will be, I wouldn't call.
So Kinnity against Sherkieran in the relegation final. How do you see that going?
Fair rivalry between the two of them. Neighbours. Did Kinnity relegate Clarine a couple of years ago? I think they might have had, and then Clarine came and won the intermediate the year after and were beaten by Tullaroan in a Leinster intermediate final. Oh, that's a tough game to call. Clarine probably showed more throughout the year, I'd say, than Kinnity. Kinnity were beaten well by us, beaten well by Rhinus the last day. Probably just about Sir Kieran, but those games where two neighbouring clubs play each other, like all bets are kind of off. There's been fair battles between them now down through the years. The only rivalry that Kinnity would have bigger than Sir Kieran would probably be Coolderry, again, neighbouring clubs again, and they've had a fair few wars literally down through the years. Tough game to call. Very, very tough game to call as well.
Okay, so in Galway then, there's obviously some big games in terms of like progressing into the quarterfinals, but the Senior B relegation final, Athenry against Clymer, that's a huge one here because it's not all that long ago that Athenry were senior championship. Senior, like I was talking to David Connors at Tuam Hurling, he said in 1998 they were senior and intermediate champions. Like they were playing in an All-Ireland final, not that many moons ago and, winning them. And now they go down to intermediate, the third tier of Galway hurling. That would be a huge fall.
Oh, God, it would be, yeah. When Burr were in their pomp, Athenry would have been as well. The two Cloonans, Joe Rabbit, played in a good few All-Ireland club semi-finals against each other. To go down to the third tier would be a bit of a disaster. There's no point in saying any different, but we've probably seen teams slip down through the years. Kiltormer, in Galway in particular, Kiltormer are All-Ireland champions. They're operating well away from Broadway, shall we say now. Who else? Portumna were relegated a couple of years ago and probably in a bit of bother at senior level and looked like slipping back down to Senior B again. So it can kind of happen. It's probably more common maybe in Galway than in other counties. But yeah, given some of the greats that Athenry have had down through the years, I'm sure they'll be trying to avoid being down the third tier. It would be a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, Clymer, they won intermediate last year, but they've had a lot of injuries. Andrew Kearney, Andrew Keary, I should say, who captained Galway to the All-Ireland to an All-Ireland in the 2000s. He plays for them. Some of the knockout games this weekend, Turlough will meet Moycullen. I think that's probably only going to go one way. Clarenbridge, I should say, will meet Ardrahan. So I would have been looking at it in terms of having seen them against Sarsfields a few weeks ago. The Giants of Ardrahan against Clarenbridge is sort of smaller player profile. You'd be thinking, Johnny Glynn versus Evan Nyland. You couldn't have picked two more different players, barely the same species in terms of size. But like Glynn apparently is appealing this all the way in terms of that suspension he got for his clash against, wasn't Darren Morrissey that game against Sarsfields?
Yeah, so that went to the CCC looked at that again through a kind of a loophole rule or whatever, and they gave him a 1-match ban. He went to the hearings committee where the 1-match ban was upheld. I'm hearing it's going to Connacht tonight,
and then probably to the DRA after that as well. I'm hearing.
Yeah, potentially to the DRA then after. So they are definitely fighting it all the way. One of the viewers saying he was playing or involved with Cartoon Shamrocks in the football last week as well. He's obviously probably keeping the head down, I'd say, at the minute, but like he'd be a massive loss to them. So I'm sure they're going to fight every way. Like, I don't know.
On what basis are you appealing this? And you're actually, every stage that you go in terms of appealing, it will become news, and therefore that video of what happened is going to be recycled more and more. And in a way, you're kind of just dragging yourself through the mud. Like, it deserves a suspension. Move on. Accept it. No one's saying you're a terrible person. You're obviously not. He seems a nice fella, but like, you did it, accept the suspension and just move on.
I'd be of that opinion as well, but that just does not seem to be the GA mentality at all. And it's a win at all costs. I'd be the same. Like, I don't know, if I was involved in something like that, I'd feel terrible over it, and I wouldn't feel good about it because it was totally very, very unsavory thing to do, and you take your medicine. There's no relegation at play here or anything. Do you know what I mean? If they're knocked out of the championship, they're knocked out of the championship. But it looks like they're going all the way. Like, and that's the GA mentality now. If you think you can get off, it seems like you try and get off. Like, am I wrong in saying that like John Milan is nearly the last person not to appeal a suspension? When he missed the All-Ireland semi-final that time after hitting Owen Murphy through the helmet. I can't recall anybody else. Did Austin Gleeson take his medicine remember when he sent off in the league semi-final last year? Yeah, I think he did, but there ain't too many more, and it just, I don't know. I think and I'm hoping when Jarlath Burns comes in as president that he's going to have a look at the disciplinary process in the GA, because it's an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess.
You see in soccer, and obviously there's big problems with officiating there. We're seeing it with VAR, but what in terms of like when there's a frivolous appeal, I think they should just double the suspension just as a deterrent. Because like in this situation, for appealing this, the ban should be doubled, I think.
Well, again, it would definitely, yeah. It definitely, no, there's nothing personal in it at all. We're just talking about the mechanisms within the GA and the rule systems. And like, it seems like if you go a certain length and if you get a really good barrister and you're able to stump up that, it's fair. Like the Dubs done it down through the years. Dermot Connolly got off at the 11th hour for an All-Ireland final. There's been several more of them, big players that have got off for big games down through the years. Obviously, the two Clare lads that were retrospectively suspended after the Munster final, both of them got off. I think it was through kind of loopholes as well. There's enough loopholes that if you have the right person and you have, basically, if you have the Johnny Cash, that you have a fair chance of getting off. But like, I really hope the disciplinary process is looked at over the coming years, because it is a mess. And even with the DRA, it's all a vacuum. Unless you know somebody that's involved or you have a contact, you don't even find out what's after happening. You really don't. And they don't send out media bulletins, or there's no communication, something like that. It's a real, like, an underground process. It's like, it's so covert and secretive almost as well.
Yeah, Tommy Larkins will meet Portumna, and Cyril Farrell is a selector with Tommy Larkins. I'm sure he'd enjoy knocking out Portumna this weekend. So
Jason Flynn hasn't really played, Shane, by all accounts, since he done the hammer as well. Might be maybe back for this weekend, but again, he'd be their best player outside of Aidan Murphy. Like, so they've done probably well to this point without him, you'd say. Yeah,
Captagal, they're going to meet Gort this weekend, and also we're going to see Sarsfields against Clymer Daly. Then in Dublin, Lucan are already through from Group 1. So the two fixtures this weekend are Coola against Crokes. So neither of those teams can finish it. So it's kind of academic in a way, because both will be through to the quarterfinals.
As Delboy would say, Shane, it's epidemic.
Yeah. So it's more about local bragging rights. So do you want to show your full hand in this game when, all that's really going to be determined is who finishes second and who finishes third? And obviously you're facing the corresponding second and third from the other group. So Cooley, to be fair, impressive enough against Bridget's and Whitehall, could leapfrog into second place. Crokes, they've serious scoring difference here and battered Bridget's the last day out. Was it 31 points or something? But their score difference is plus 37. They scored 9 goals. Whitehall and Bridget's winner will play the 5th in Group 2. But both teams are in relegation no matter what. So it's just about getting a bit of confidence, I suppose, going for the relegation playoffs.
What's the story with Con, Shane? Is he back? Is he back hurling? Has he been involved with Coola, or is he expected to be back?
I'm not sure if he's going to be involved this weekend because, they've been kind of he has been playing football, but there's probably a case of minding the lad as well after a very, very long season. So I would be shocked to see him play this weekend because there's nothing really at stake. So, yeah.
The only thing is it would be getting his eye in or whatever for a potentially a knockout game if he is going to be involved.
Yeah, no, true enough. But I suppose the main thing is have the body right, I suppose. Then the other group, so at the top at the moment, 3 wins from 3 is Ballyboden. Then Nafina and St. Vincent's, they're both on 4 points each, two wins. Plunkets are not playing this weekend. They've all 4 of their games played. And Fogs, they're on the bottom with 0 points. So what's at stake this weekend where Nafina, Boden and Vince, they're all through to quarterfinals, but any of them can finish top based on how results go. So Vincent's will be playing Fogs. So Vincent's win, they're just depending on what happens in the other game. Fogs are minus 56 scoring difference after 3 games, so it really hasn't been going too well for them. That's not far off a 19-point loss per game. Nafina again, so I think everyone will be kind of fancying Pat Gilroy's Vincent's to win that game. So Bowden, if they win or draw, they'll get through to the semi-final, which would be nice. They'll be able to rest up a little bit longer. And Nafina know that a win could be enough for them to seal top spot. So that's Dublin there at the moment. We'll see how those games go. There's not too much at stake this weekend.
Is Conal Keeney still going with Bowden?
I haven't seen Bowden play actually in the flesh this year. Funny enough, a lot of their games have been outside the limelight. I think I might have seen the Vincent's Bowden game, but I just can't remember if he played or not. I presume he is playing.
Yeah, he just stays going. He's been going as long as Father Time nearly at this stage. Just a quick one here. Andrew Sullivan brought up a comment here. I think it's interesting. He just says, Orla Cronin getting off last minute last year too because it was too late to make a decision, basically. Served 3-match ban in the league then earlier this year. Terrible process. I'm actually not 100% sure if she served a 3-match ban. I remember listening to Patrick Mulcahy on RT one day. It was the day they beat Kilkenny in was that a quarter-final they beat them in or a semi-final? I can't remember. Where he said basically that the ban was still on hold. So I'm actually not 100% sure of that. So the whole system needs a complete overhaul. It's an absolute disaster. It's a disaster for everyone involved. And you're basically looking for somebody who knows the rule book inside out. And the thing with the GA rule book at the minute, and it needs so much to be tightened up. Rules can be interpreted in so many different ways as well. And it depending on various interpretations, you can go different ways. So a lot of the rules are quite open-ended and they leave a lack of clarity and they lead to things like that happening with Orla Cronin, lead to things that are happening with Johnny Glynn at the minute as well.
Yeah, so a couple of other bits of news. Kevin Walsh is staying with the Cork senior football team, which, worked out quite well for them last year. Adrian McGrath, by the way, this is back to the whole cash talk. Cash must survive, otherwise the banks are siphoning off money on every single transaction. Yeah, which they love to do, of course. And the football group, a new football review committee has been established by Larry McCarthy to look at different ways of bettering the spectacle of the game. So that's going to feature Billy Morgan, Pat Gilroy, Michael Murphy, Malachy O'Rourke, Mickey Ned O'Sullivan, and David Hassan, who's been the chairman of the Playing Rules Committee. So we'll see. How many of those guys
will be back involved with inter-county football next year?
Well, you'd imagine Michael Murphy's. Will he be dragged in by Jim McGuinness either as a player or part of the backroom team at some stage? Pat Gilroy probably will be. Malachy O'Rourke, there's talk of him being a leading candidate for Derry. Mickey Ned, probably not. So are you suggesting that maybe this isn't the right group of people?
No, it's a great meeting of the minds. I'm just wondering whether, Malachy's seems to be the name that most people are talking about for Derry. Like, Jesus, with Kieran Mina stepping away or not being involved, that is a fair, attractive job. Like, you're taking over a team, taking over a team that are, you know, within a score potentially of winning All-Ireland based on the All-Ireland semi-final last year. It's going to be fascinating to see who they go for. With regards to Malachy, he's obviously brings all the experience to the table with Monaghan, but he's with the Glen, which would make it quite tricky to take over Derry. And like the Glen, I'd imagine, have aspirations of winning an All-Ireland club title this year and righting the wrong of the Crokes kind of numerical saga, shall we say, of the All-Ireland final. So I know it's been done before. I know Anthony Cunningham did it with Gary Castle and the Galway hurlers. I know Mickey Graham did it with Mullinachta and Cavan. Stephen Rochford with Mayo. There's probably one or two more as well. But like it's
Anthony
more and
Cunningham,
more. Yeah,
Gary Castle and Galway.
Yeah. It's getting more and more difficult to do it though. Malachy could be tied up to mid to late January realistically, or is it all been fed off in the 1 year this year? I'm actually not 100% sure of that, but he would be obviously a great appointment, and I'm sure he knows the Derry scene inside out. Conor Gilligan's another one that's been mentioned as well. Very interesting to see who they go for.
Yeah, Colm Nally, he's joined the backroom team with Glen Ryan as a coach, so he's previously been involved with the likes of Meath, and obviously has a lot of experience. We've interviewed him on the show before, so knows an awful lot about football. We had him actually at a coaching clinic in Father Manning Gales in Longford. He was excellent that day. A great relief in Dublin because Brian Howard, he's avoided the cruciate. He's going to be out for the season with Raheny because I don't think he'd be right until the new year. But he's had a minor operation and he should be okay for 2024. I'll just go through some of the fixtures in Kerry this weekend. In Group 1, Temple will meet West Kerry, East Kerry against South Kerry. Group 2, Rathmore will meet St. Kieran's, Field Rangers against Kenmare Shamrocks. Cairns O'Reilly and Shannon Rangers will do battle in Group 3, as will Mid Kerry against Spa. It's just some pronunciation of it. And Dingle will meet Crokes in Group 4, and the Gale will meet St. Brennan's Board. I'm not sure if you have any comment to make on that.
Yeah, I do, because there's never, like, East Kerry have never had the situation where, like, the Cliffords have generally been out of whatever they were in, going in and playing with the divisional side. But now I presume they're playing with East Kerry this weekend, and then they have the intermediate championship final the week after. Like,
wouldn't you want them pulled, really? If you're over the club here, you'd want them pulled.
100% you would, yeah. So I'm not exactly sure how the group scenario works out
here.
They
should be pulled, by the way.
I think they should, realistically. Yeah. Like at the end, and it's funny because if Fossa were to win Saturday or Sunday week, the boys can't play for East Kerry until they're no longer senior again. So, like, I think they should be pulled this weekend. They should put all eggs into the Fossa basket. Regardless of how that goes, go back with East Kerry then the week after or whatever. But I think that club fixture, like your actual club that you've played with all your life, has to take precedence over the divisional side.
Yeah, can you imagine if either of them get injured playing for the divisional side? Yeah, that wouldn't go down well. Mayo then, Balla are meeting Ballina Stephenites this weekend in Group 1. Brafey will do battle with Mayo Gales. Group 2 will see Westport against Clare Morris and Balladreen against Charlestown Sarsfields. Group 3 is a meeting of Ballintubber against Gary Moore, and also Belmullet meeting the Nail. So the bullet from Belmullet and the Nail. Ballyhonus meet Castlebar Mitchells, and Knockmore against Ahamore. Westmeath, there's a couple of semi-finals on there. St. Lomans will meet Tyrrell's Pass, and Carlstown Kinnegad against Collery. And I was just looking into this a little bit more. So Tyrrell's Pass beat Tang in the quarterfinals. Last year they lost the semi-final to the Downs, and they fairly well rattled Lomans in the 2020 final. They have Dennis Glennon still playing at 39, but like Lomans with John Heslin and so on, they're obviously very, very strong team then. And then Collery in the other semi-final against Carlstown Kinnegad. Like, Carlstown absolutely hammered them, I think, when they met earlier in the season. And apparently, I was reading the Westmeath Independent, it's the first time that Collery have been in the semi-finals. Shane K. Curran is over that team. He's saying they're massive underdogs. They beat Athlone the last day out. But they do have, like, foreign players in the likes of Sean Baker and Tyke Baker, and Kevin Maguire, the Westmeath captain. He's playing for them as well. I might just read out the Clare or quarterfinals, I should say, as well. Kilmurray Brecon meet Cratloe St. Breckons against Lissy Casey, and Kildysert against Milltown. Now, I only have 3 of them written down here. I'm not sure is there actually one team directly into the semi-finals, so apologies if I've left one out there.
Just on Westmeath, Shane, yeah, like that Lomans and Tyrrell's Pass should be an absolute belter for a semi-final. Massive opportunity on the other side for either Collery or Carlstown Kinnegad to get through to the final. Lomans were beaten in the final last year, going for 3 in a row. I think I'm right in saying, yeah. from what I'm hearing, they've had the bit between their teeth this year and are very keen to get, like, how much longer can John Hezon and the like stay going? They're trying to max out as much as they possibly can. Probably one of the unluckiest teams to never get their hands on a Leinster title. Was it Moorfield that they were edged out by in a Leinster final maybe 4 or 5 years ago? I'd probably have Lomans as strong enough favourites to win the thing out, but that'll be a tight semi-final, definitely.
Yeah, and then in Laois, the quarterfinals this weekend, Port Arlington will meet Courtwood, O'Dempsey's against Port Laois, Collection against Greg Cullen, and St. Joseph's against Emo.
Yeah, there's a question in here. I was trying to know what he was talking about for a minute. Hurlem1234 says, Michael, you still scrubbing up the black and white Cooper? Surely am. We're actually playing the Senior B semi-final on Sunday. It's the curtain raiser to the Burrish in Rome game. We're playing Claudia Gales, who came down from Senior A last year. We woeful strong. That is by about 6 or 7 in the group stages already. So yeah, still scrubbing up the Cooper with the old micro face guard on it. I tell you, I'm in the minority. There's not too many of them knocking around anymore, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I have my blue and red helmet as well. So it's 2 old helmets that were put together. She's a beaut. She's going to see action this Sunday morning around 11 o'clock? I have to find out. We're against Fogs, I think. So getting that easy.
You happy enough to play a championship game at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning?
Doesn't bother me that much. Actually, the last time I think we played at 10:30, there was some clash or other. So, and maybe due to availability of referees, it had to be moved forward a little bit.
You wanted a good run today, so you did dinner at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, just having myself right for the match too. Like, I wonder, will I be on the freeze? Do you know, there's been no.
Hey, come here. Have one for you. I've only noticed this the last maybe 3 to 4 years. The day of a match, I cannot eat anything anymore. Like,
why? Nerves?
No. My body is not able to digest food the day of a game. I got going through this weird thing. It's only the last maybe 4 years where my body, without being too gross, but no, my body is empty playing a match. I can't have anything in my stomach, anything like that. It's like it must be a bit of nerves. It's a weird thing where, yeah, my system is totally flushed out playing a game. It must be nerves. But I don't know why it would be, because the older you get, you're not necessarily nervous playing. But I think it's a weird one. I think the body knows what's coming.
War.
War. I think the body knows what's coming and it just empties completely. Like, say we're playing at 2 o'clock on Sunday. I will have a banana at about 8:30 and I'll have a few energy drinks and that'll be it. I genuinely now would not be able to, we trained the other night, and this is even for training now. I'm not talking about just games. This is even for training, the day of training. I wouldn't be able to eat 5 hours before training.
Even a bar of chocolate?
No, definitely not. It would destroy me. No, it would absolutely destroy me. I just wouldn't be able to. It's a real weird thing. I remember hearing Charlie Redmond say something similar, that if he had anything even 4 or 5 hours before any sort of a game, his body would just almost reject it. Mine would be the same now. It wouldn't reject it, but I'd just feel all bloated and full and not good. Yeah, weird.
I generally like to eat at least 2 hours before, and I'd probably time it for about 2.5. But if it's a match in the morning when you've gone the whole night without eating, I'd be okay to eat something an hour and a half beforehand, because it'd be small enough anyway. Wouldn't be that much.
Away. If we were playing on Sunday morning at 12, I probably wouldn't eat anything and would just have eaten really well the day before and loaded up, and I'd be the finest the next day, not a bother.
Yeah, Ace Sully 180 changed the true to Cahaman of Today FM. Got the better of you the last day.
Yes. Yes, it is.
No ball even came into us. Honest to God.
Hey, I'm not having to go at Cottle here. I'm only having to go at you. They knew not to hit the ball in because the two of you were useless. I'm only messing.
Okay, so that's it from the show today. Loads coming up this weekend, so keep an eye out on the OurGame channels as well. Don't forget to go to ourgame.ie, ourstore.ie if you want to get any of the merchandise we have there. Michael, we'll chat to you after the weekend.
Cheers, Shane.